Clarity.
About Aleph. First, we were talking about the duality, and then we were talking about
Yeah.
how it, and I don't know. I don't take notes. So I don't
Anyone take notes? No? Nobody takes notes? Okay. So let's continue. So last time we were comparing the first and second stories of Reshit in the context of the way in which the second story is very unity oriented in terms of the way creation is described as being some emergence of products of growth, right? Remember, there's the unfolding of a history that begins on one day, right? That's the Yom HaSotashan. And we noticed that phenomenon is a really significant one in terms of the orientation of one's mind, one's heart. The world is created with different entities separate from one another in their creation. It's very different than a world which begins with light and then the light begins to be formed, or however the process, the physics of the process is, whatever it is. Rashi says that everything was on the first day. That's what we saw last time. So that's like a very, that creates a very different set of possibilities for our world and for our lives in terms of the intimacy that we can have with that which is around us in a way that's not really available if everything comes from a different beginning. Now, of course, both stories have Hashem as being the source, right? But it's very different if Hashem is like making different things, or Hashem has made one origin for all things to emerge from. It's a very different depiction of the commonality of life and what it shares. So that was what we were exploring last time, and saw how beautifully the Torah just does a very simple literary trick in a way, like, and changes the beginning of that second story from being a bet, like the first story, to an olive. I think to notice that is a big gift. And the other thing, and I think this is where we ended up last time. It was a very short class. Was that one of the most outstanding things about the difference, certainly in terms of the context of what we're exploring? One of the most outstanding differences is that in the first story, humanity is created male and female. But in the second story, there's only one human being, Adam. Adam taken out of the ground, Adam being both male and female together. As Rashi learns it, the Tzelah is a word. Remember, we showed it to you on the blackboard, like the word sail, like the word for shadow. There's another side, right? And therefore, the creation of male and female is not a process of is a process, as opposed to the first creation story in which there's a male and there's a female. And in the first creation story, everything that has to do with their interaction seems to be defined by ta'aretz, right? That they should be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, right? It's a very different description than in the second story, where there's one human being who becomes split into two. And then the only thing we're told actually about that, I mean, this is just so different, and it's so important to pay attention to. Right? The only thing that we're told about that is that this is why a person leaves his home. The Davak Bishro, it's from the male perspective, and comes to Eve, or be close to his wife, Ahila Basar Echad, and they become one flesh, they become one human being again. In other words, description is that there's no mention of being fruitful and multiplying in that story. There's no question. There's no presence to the sort of mechanics of how this is going to be a sustainable creation, right? In other words, in the first story, so there's a lot about the seeds and it has the right seeds and the seeds. There's a lot of that, and then when it's male and female, it's that they'd be able to be fruitful and multiply. There's nothing about them having wine or being together. And in the second story, there's no description of the of the fertility. There's just a description of them becoming one. And I think this is pretty much, I believe, where we stopped. That like there was a point that I really wanted to make, which I'm not sure it was brought out well enough, and that is that we actually need both these stories. Right? That since so to speak, the thesis of what I'm teaching in these few classes is that the entire Torah sort of tends us towards love, and that the ultimate realization of humanity is love, as we explored in the first class when we met. So then, if that's the case, then we really need to sort of take a new look at a lot of what's going on in the Torah from that perspective, leading us down that path. Now, a lot about love has to do with the perspective one has on life. You know, it's very much rooted in how you see things, and how you feel about them, and result of how you see them, experience them, think about them. Whereas, obviously, we're a very complex system which integrates many different layers of phenomena, right? But and and clearly there's close relationships in the animal kingdom that are pretty obvious to people who watch animals. It seems to be more than just reproduction. I mean, and again, there also, as you move down lower in the chain of complexity of life, so there would seem to be less emotion involved and more just reproduction. Although we don't know, we actually can't know what's going on in the worlds of consciousness that, on whatever level these phenomena have. I mean, who knows? Could be molecules have consciousness too, and we're experiencing something. We can't know that, right? We can theorize about it. And there are theories and psychism, different types of orientations around the material phenomenon and how conscious they are and how they're feeling. We don't know, right? But what we do know about ourselves is that we do. And you can kind of get a feeling about dogs and certain other kinds of more complex mammals that seem to. And yeah, so I'm saying the reason I'm saying this is that it doesn't seem that it's because of the way the dog thinks about life that it feels closeness to its owner. Okay? In other words, the idea of intellection, it doesn't seem to be a necessary element, at least for that kind of emotional responsiveness. Right? There seems to be some kind of an emotional responsiveness. So again, no one lives inside a dog, so no one really knows. It certainly looks that way, right? And that there's some kind of a connection which moves far beyond the physical, right? To the point of serious empirical evidence that a dog has a very strong sense of their master long before they actually show up. So it's like there's something going on there in the realm of consciousness. Right? But nevertheless, when it comes to us as human beings, the way we see things, right, the way we understand them, does seem to be highly impactful on what it is that we feel about them, and how close we we sense we can get, right? It's not just a matter of feeling a resonance. There's also seems to be thought. Although I can say that, you know, uh, I didn't know anything about my wife when I first met her, but I felt very clear that, that she was she was going to be my wife. Not in a prophetic sense, and just like there was a certain visceral response. And it's not, because, oh, I know how she's committed to this, she's really great at that, and none of that at all. So, but on the other hand, I wouldn't say that was quite what was love. There was kind of an attraction or a resonance. Love, certainly in the teachings as they're spelled out in various places, but love has also to do with how you see life. Like, obviously, if I had seen her for some reason as an enemy or a foreign life form or, whatever it would be, would likely get in the way of further developing a romantic engagement and finally a loving one. I'm, you know, I'm making these points because that's obviously part of our exploration. We're about to see something happen in the game. We seem to be waiting about it. But right now, the reason I'm kind of spelling this out is because this perception, which the Chumash actually in a way contradicts itself to tell us, namely, if you remember what we were on last time, that the world was created in one day. On the day God made the world. Sorry, Goldie, you weren't here, but we were like emphasizing that in the verse.
But I'm happy you caught me up in the beginning.
Yeah, go ahead, exactly. Because I made that quick kind of thing. Like, yeah, it's like that really needs to be related to us as being a very serious thing that the text is doing. The text will not contradict itself unless either it's sloppy, which it's not, or it's trying to jar us into seeing something that we wouldn't have had it. Oh, wait, how did it become one day? It was 6 days, right? Something's going on here. And that something that's going on here is the way the Chumash actually pushes you into a second perspective on creation. And the way it does it in the most succinct way is the first creation is by a god named Elohim, and the second one is by a god named Havaya, right? Yud Ke Vav Ke. I mean, that's a pretty overt technique, right? Which is to say the following, that the first story is laying out very strict and clear boundaries. Elohim is then borrowed as a word for people who are judges in the court. And the real task of a judge is to put things in their place. If you think someone took something away from you, so then it will be the task of the judge to get it back to you, right? In the most simple sense, right? And other levels where justice is more complex, obviously. That's a simple, right? But that has to do with boundaries. And Shem Havaya is the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, as I believe we pointed out here in the past, is this peculiar arrangement of letters that are the most overtly masculine and feminine letters in the alphabet. The Yud and the Vav are very masculine in their being so linear, and the Hey, with its openings, right, to receive and to give, assuming the one on the left side is to receive and the one on the bottom is to give out, is a very feminine figure. And in fact, among all the letters of the alphabet, I don't think you can find a more descriptive one of that particular feminine aspect, right? It's not all there is to femininity, but it's it's a pretty good, it's better than XY, as a symbol for masculine, feminine, right? I mean, so, but to have the name of Hashem introduced to us in that second chapter as being that name, and it speaks volumes about the way in which somehow these two powers are bonded together in a single name. But we've done a little gematria and numerology, right? But like, I mean, Yud K Vav K is kind of an astounding example, being that its gematria is 26, which is on the simplest reading of 26 is, well, it's Ahava twice. Ahava is 13. In other words, there's an interconnection of Ahava, which has to do with the bounded separateness of the two partners that are involved in it, but the unification of them into one single name. Right? So I think that's pretty telling, right? And I believe that one of the most important things for it to sort of message us or indicate to us is the following, and that is that boundaries, both boundaries and mergence, both boundaries and unification, both boundaries and sameness are elemental to the path forward. And this is like this is a very, very important thing to know, that in as much as each of the partners in the Jungian language, which is fair enough, individuate and know themselves in their uniqueness, the more potential for love there will be. In other words, the more the presence of Elohim for each of them, the more of a foundation that's appropriate for love will be there. You can't get to love without that first story. But on the other hand, if all there is that delineation and division, then there will not be love either. There will simply be a contest, a jealousy, lust, the three things that we learn later. And if we get to it, I don't know how far we're going to get in this course. But those are the three primary antagonists to love, as we'll see in the story of Garden of Eden, I hope, where on the one hand, you can have like jealousy, where the boundaries are so harsh that anyone else is a challenge to me, period. Because you're always going to find something to be jealous of someone else about, even if they have the worst life. If you're attentive, you'll probably notice that they've got something you don't, because they definitely do.
Whole lot, yeah.
Yeah, they're not you. So if your entire orientation is the sort of the uniqueness of yourself is not in the positive sense of my uniqueness doesn't contradict your uniqueness, but rather I am absolutely unique, and in any way that you share anything with me, right? And that would be an issue for me,
Yeah.
right? So like that's going to certainly obviously take you out of love, but also that lusting, which is that I must have you for my own, and not just assert, but swallow your being into mine, right? Is in a way the other end of that, right? of like, I will take it all for me. I will take it all for me. Which is a complete, in a sense, loss of boundaries, where lusting would come out of, so to speak, only having the second story, where all is one. So all is one. So come on over here. It's like, um, so that either on its own, right, it will become antithetical to the ability to love, right? But and therefore, only by virtue of having both a clear sense of difference, boundaries, experiencing what might even be polarities, right, which is the way it works with male and female, is experiencing the polarities and the difference in its real intensity with the which is why I think male and female is such an incredible, and the Maharal says miraculous phenomenon, that they can actually get together, and that those polarities as opposites on certain levels, obviously not completely opposites, but opposites on a certain level, that there's a commonality of existence that they're sharing, as taught in that second story, right? Creates the great energy and tension, which is the realm of love. Energy and tension, by which I mean that on the one hand, there's a very passionate attraction, which we experience passionately, but you could just turn it into physics. I mean, they're both part of the same whole, and so obviously there's some strange attraction in wholes to each other, right? Which becomes, you get all kinds of chemicals and hormones involved in that. You're in trouble, but that's the basic given. And on the other hand, that they're different, so they can never really fully merge, nor should they. For that would lose love. That would just become simple oneness, which is not the intention, and is not really the world of love. The world of love is a very profound reverence for difference, with a very powerful attraction of those parts that are different one from another to bond, to be together. So you can see how, one might ask, I mean, after you have the second story of creation, let's throw that first one out the window. What do we want that Zachar and the Keva stuff and the mechanics and everything separate? Let's just submerge into the one. And that's where love is, right? Wrong. That's not where love is. Love requires both of those powers. And Shlomo HaMelech actually says this in the most beautiful way, really, one of the verses in the Song of Songs, which is really, I mean, it looks just like kind of an almost adolescent romance, that's going on there. It's got that also. But there's some very profound statements there, which I believe are, the real teachings about love that the Tanakh offers. There's plenty of teachings about it, but nevertheless, Shlomo Melech says there that has the woman saying, "Smolo tachat roshi v'yamino techabkeni." This becomes a very important verse, which literally means his left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. Which is really it's obviously a very beautiful physical description, but makes a more profound sense and conceptual teaching when you understand that the left, is always associated with din, with Elohim, with boundaries, and the yamin is oriented towards unification, bonding, and merging. So his right hand is embracing me and drawing me close, but his left hand continues to support my head. And that's just like, it's amazing to witness such a precise kind of a description, in a illustration. Yeah, his love for me and his drawing me close is not one which is undermining my separateness, my uniqueness, my own path. But nevertheless, he's drawing me very close. But he continues to support my head with his left hand. The head being the protrusion of the body, which maintains its own consciousness, its own awareness, its own way of seeing, its own way of living life, right? And so it's really, in the context we're talking, it's really that a bound, that bonding and bound together of these two worlds, really, that make it possible for us to experience love. And in a way, and this is, I think, where we're going to go now, in a way, let's take your question in a second, Rabbi, in a way, sort of in that world of the second story, where I think we're going to get a certain much deeper sense of what happens that goes wrong there in the Garden of Eden, and what they were looking for and didn't have, and the process which becomes human history of groping our ways around, trying to recontact the right relationship between these powers. Yeah. Okay. So what was the?
Yeah, I hope it's okay to ask this in this forum, but I'm hearing you say that we need both, like a separation and this connection and love. And I'm wondering, and
This
I
connection
really,
and unification.
yeah, and I really, it's resonating and I'm hearing it. I'm just wondering, like when a man and wife come together, isn't like all boundaries, like now they're interconnecting to be one, and that's not when they're like, that's when they're really being one.
Well, no, what happens in marriage is actually a conflict of those elements. I have a teaching, which in this very room, probably 20 years ago, I gave over a series about the following, which I'll just say very in synopsis. In marriage, well, I'll just put it, it's just straight conceptual. In marriage, both are present. There's not a merging into oneness. And believe me, the two parties stay very much of their own and ought to be. And I want to tell you something like, yeah,
I'm
like,
talking about intimacy. I hope that was clear.
oh, physical intimacy?
Yeah, it's fleeting.
and
There is a merging into oneness, but it's
That's
fleeting.
when they're
It's
like,
momentarily.
obviously marriage is not just
No, yeah, I'll tell you the
Intimacy,
truth.
but-
In physical intimacy, there is a breaking of many of the boundaries which hold them separate. There can be a very peaked moment of experiencing our at one, but first of all, that there be that is not only available in sexual intimacy. Some of the moments of just sensing our at oneness are available in many different ways. In fact, the Ramban, Nachmanides, on the verse which says, and they will become one flesh, says not only physical intimacy, but also that they go around in their day with their partner on their mind, each with their partner in their awareness. Like there's a kind of at oneness between them that is one of consciousness and awareness, and not just awareness. So, but let me make the point maybe a little bit better. uh, all of life, spiritual life and love life, um, have an oscillation in them. In other words, there can be moments of pure union with the divine. Let's go back to the relationship with God, right? Can be those moments. Those are not marvelous moments, exquisite moments, right? But they are not they're not any more true than our experience of ourselves as ourselves in relation to the divine. Those are both true. Those are both true. That's certainly the Jewish perspective. Those are both true. It's not that this is a hallucination and that is the truth. We are both true, and we are called into this life and into this body and into this ego and into this personality. We are called to experience those. They're not lies. You see, if your world is one in which there is not a God that wills things, if say you're a non-theist Buddhist or something, so then there's no one who has willed you to be here. So therefore, it's a perfectly legitimate claim to say you're just living an illusion. Just got to get out of here. You're a prisoner to an illusion. But if you have a God who actually created this and desires it, then you're living in an illusion if you think that your task is to escape this. You see that? Because and I'm not an expert in Buddhism, but I think I get enough of this particular point about it. If there is no identity, if there is no I, capital I, that is the origin of our universe, then my having an I is a problem. It's a way of experiencing that which has no I. And so that path becomes very negative about things that I believe Jewish teaching holds very dear. My personhood, my boundaries, my reality, my history, all those things that Judaism seems to have a lot of, right? So that's because if you know the world to have been created by one who desires it and wants it and has a will, then your having desire and will become very positive things, as much as they reflect the divine desire and will. It's a good thing you have desire and will, because that makes you more divine, not less divine. Okay? So then, once you see that, then it becomes very understandable that you would want to be able to access this oneness and merging and the one day that everything merged from. But without that becoming the only abode in which you live, but rather, and to put it like in a crass kind of a way, rather you touch that and you move here and you learn to hold both those types of consciousness together and allow them to sort of play off each other. Yeah.
So basically, when couples are
And
anyone
then now
feels
let's bring
union-
it back down to the couple. So you can see now how that would become a model also for coupling. In other words, we taste sometimes the simple pleasure of our together in one, and mostly we experience our being different. But when that difference is informed by that one, then that difference becomes a great attractor, not a divider. That's the way I would put it.
Goldie's bringing it to the couple, and I'm thinking that and the couple of Israel and Hashem.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the first, I actually, to make it in a way more understandable, I went there first and then took it back But indeed, her question was about the couple.
Yeah.
And you want to go back to the divine and
Can we
human
say, I
relation.
love the sine wave or the frequency or the oscillating, like everything, I feel like there is this constant oscillating. Can we say that oscillation is between kadosh and bracha?
There's a way to look at it like that. I mean, if that helps you to say those
Oh, okay.
words.
Like we're moving into this separate holy completeness, but then we want to expand it? Like, how do you
Well,
expand
I
it?
think I think you're beginning to talk about another thing,
Oh,
but yeah, I think to respond to her question, I think we did a good job. If you have another question, you can ask that
I think it's
question.
the same thing, just on
Okay.
a bit more
Okay.
cosmic expanded
Okay.
experience.
Or Daniel, you did touch on relationships between us and God and feeling like
Very
moments
much.
of sublimity.
Sure. No, I'm not negating that. I'm just saying that to bring in Kadosh and Baruch would now require a lot of investigation on the meanings of those words. But if that's what I meant, if that helps you to give it a name, so good. I'm not going to go into that.
Okay.
That
Thank you.
well, okay. Yeah. So let me just something's going on over here. Okay. Yeah, okay, so that was so now what I wanted to what I said I'd like to now look at with you is a bit of what happens here and in a way in which will help us. But I want to do two things that could be helpful. I mean, first of all, knowing that I think knowing about this kind of a dynamic and interplay between these two stories, between these two perspectives, can be very enriching and also can assist in alleviating what might be a frustration that a couple might experience. Because now I'll go into because there are actually stages that couple's life goes through their chapters. And in another passage, which is in Shir Hashirim, which I find extremely illustrative. So the male lover comes to the door, beloved, who's inside there and sleepily in bed, right? And she describes how she hears him knocking on the door, cold or I hear the sound of my lover pounding, which is also a beautiful and suggestive imagery of like the heart pounding. You kind of wonder when you're reading it, is he knocking on the door? Is he beating her heart? What's actually going on there, because the use of the language is in a way suggestive of both. But he says to her, "Freely open up for me." Is this as good as it gets?
Maybe go
Yeah, different
That's
parts.
as good as it gets.
Maybe different
On the
spot.
right side, it's better.
No, but then people watching.
I know, we can tilt it a little if you like.
Oh, this is excellent.
Yeah,
He
that's
says, "Open it up, Afoti, Rayati, Yonati, Tamati." Okay, I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to start writing translations, but she hears him saying to him, "Open up, my sister. Open up, my lover. Open up, my dove. Open up, my perfect one, my complete one." So these four appellations, right, are actually, in my understanding, are the whole expression of the beloved of the lover to his beloved, that our love is all these things. They are, and here I'm going to spell them out. They are a closeness which was like a oneness, really. I mean, my sister, the word achot starts with the same two letters that the word echad begins with, right? Because its root is ichui, which means bonded together, kinship, kind, one of a kind. We're both kin because we're the same kind of thing. That's actually a true etymology. So it's like my one who I am at one with, but also the one who I passionately love, which in order to passionately love, I can't be at one with. And the word ra'ayati has the same root as the word for something which is shaky and unstable, because the oneness has become split, right? Like the trua that we sound on Rosh Hashanah is the sound of a shofar with separate sounds.
Is that like the splitting of a thumb?
They're also split. Well,
Okay,
phew,
sorry.
you've got
Sorry.
a mythic imagination. No wonder you paint. Arayati. Well, good, fine. I understand your imagination. And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. That's yes, correct. Yes. Rayati. But let's stay on target here. The words.
Isn't Raya friend?
A raya, as in Hebrew, has become a friend, but in the Torah, it's it's a counterpart. You shall v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. It's not that you should love your lover like you love yourself, although it could be, but reya there is a counterpart, a friend. It's hard to find the right words for this, but in Shira Shirim, it's the romantic lover. Clearly there, it's a romantic friendship. So, sister, lover, dove. And here's my understanding that there's the other element, which is just simple faithfulness. The doves are the image in the Bible of faithfulness. And in the bird kingdom, right? In the animal kingdom in general, there's two doves, because indeed they're the most faithful, I believe. I mean, I'm sure there are other phenomena in the animal kingdom, right? But nevertheless, most animals do the zachar v'nekeva thing, right? It's male, female, egg, and sperm, and child, and bye-bye, dad. Or something like that. Or dad might not even be there for the birth, Or they might stick together. Penguins are a little bit more, interesting about that. But certainly like fish, they just drop it, and hopefully there'll be some eggs down there when it arrives. It's like, there's all kinds of weird things, but they all revolve around the Zachar and the Keva, right? So Yonati is an outstanding, it's not unique, but an outstanding example of the kind of faithfulness that's put together, right? The Yonah. And in fact, there are also, okay, we'll just leave it like that. There's other things we can talk about. And then finally, the last thing that he says to her is my perfect one. Now, this is a very interesting word. Like Yaakov was tam, which means he was whole. He's so inclusive that he's sitting in two tents. He's so inclusive that he, many things, but like just take the ladder for now, right? Up and down, everything in between, right? Full integrity. But there's another meaning to that word, which is related to twin. A ta'om is a twin. I don't know exactly, but I have a sense of this being like a sense of the perfection of our wholeness that is being described there too. So now what I want to say is that notice how there's these four different statements about their love, his love for her, right? You're my sister, which I believe has to do with a kind of fraternal oneness. Well, let's talk about marriage for a minute. It's like it'll feel that way at the beginning. I've been looking for you forever. We are both one with each other. It's nice for a few days. But then you start getting the differences between you, right? That's the potential for that is ra'ayati. But things get shaky. And I didn't realize that about you. I mean, how can you said that to me? How could you be so unfeeling? I remember getting insulted like by my wife during the Sheva brachas. I was like, I went into this. I just couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe it either for different reasons. I was like, what's going on here? That's kind of what they call differentiation. It's like, but I believe the lover is saying to her, we are one like brother and sister. We are two like passionate lovers. We can be faithful like two doves who stick it out, even when Lady Dove knows that husband dove isn't what she was expecting.
Not a dove. It's a vulture. It is a dove.
And then Tamati is a stage which, I'm not sure exactly what to say about it, but there's something of a wholeness which is able to hold together those first three that I just described, and by virtue of that, there's a tmimut, a tone, which is a wholeness, right, of a fullness of integration, which is there, and perhaps it's a chronology, and I think it is also a chronology, and it's also a dynamic of elements that are at play with each other all the time, right? And it reflects beautifully, I think, some of the things we've been talking about this morning, about first story, second story, Smolo and Yumino, and a name of God which holds and incorporates both, and a kind of a life which is able to hold this oscillation, this movement between Achoti and Rayati and Yamati and Tamati, and so his knocking on her heart, his knocking on the doors is almost like it's like it's more than just like wake up. It's an invitation to a level of living together, which if we're going to go for it, we need to go for it into it consciously of these being the levels and elements that this life is going to be composed of. So good. So what I'd like to look at next time is, some of the things that get in the way, I guess. And we'll do that by an exploration of the story of eating from the tree, right? And how that reflects the things that can block sort of ideal life I'm describing. Okay.
תודה
So
רבה.
much. Thank you so much.
Bye bye out there. Sure you want to stop recording.